I think from what I can tell from speaking to my friends, anxiety comes in lots of different forms. When I tell people that, they're often surprised to hear it. I kind of just have described myself in the past as like a fake shy person. So I've always felt very shy, okay? Kind of shy and low in confidence. And like I kind of want to hide. And yet I'm 6 feet tall and I have like 6,000 teeth in my head. And it's really hard to hide. And as soon as I hit puberty, I kind of realized that. And when I walked into a room, unless I worked very hard to overcompensate for that and disarm people and smile and show them that I wasn't threatening, then things were harder for me. So I had to kind of fake bolster my confidence and project this kind of like confident, together, serene person in order to kind of manage social situations. Sometimes anxiety is worse than others. I am someone who I crave being alone. I don't know if it's a combination of being an only child or what it is, but I sometimes just cannot bear to be around people. I find it exhausting and overwhelming. I can just sit at home for days and not speak to anybody. I know that makes me sound completely insane, but it's like the only way that I can really quiet my anxiety. Yes, and I think it's definitely made me be more vocal about my own like mental health journey in recent years, because I can tell that people, they're like, but you seem, you've got it all kind of thing. And sometimes I feel the opposite of that. I mean, I do sometimes have imposter syndrome, and especially as I've got older and my career has developed and gone off in different directions, my anxiety's got worse. The way that I feel inside often is completely at odds with how other people see me. And that's something that has happened more recently. Like, I lived in London most of my adult life, and then I moved to New York 2 years ago. And moving here, I really had to change and adapt culturally in order to fit in. And being Charlotte until that point had hinged on not fitting in. My career was built on the fact that I looked a certain way, but clearly wasn't that stereotype. I'd been able to be successful at Vice because I was like a misfit kind of. And I thrived on just being able to be myself, which was this thing that didn't fit anywhere. And suddenly I moved to America and I was like, oh, people are going to think I'm weird. I'm going to have to kind of change who I am. And I started comparing myself to other people. And my anxiety got a lot worse because I stopped kind of trusting my instincts, and I got paranoid that people thought I was stupid or I was no longer like good at my job, like all these kinds of things. It was like that for almost a year. And then, I've been having therapy for years, and I finally realized like that was all in my head. Basically, I created this entire narrative and everyone just still thought I was the same Charlotte that I always had been. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I'm a one-trick pony kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to boil 10 years of my life down to give you one answer, but like, when I started at Vice, I didn't expect to have the career that I've had. I didn't think much of myself at all. I didn't have any ambition. I had had no role models in my life. I didn't know that I could be a journalist or be on camera or have any ideas or have a voice worth listening to. I was someone who I suppose was comfortable in institutions. My parents had sent me to a convent school for 15 years. I was at the same school with the same small class of girls. So my childhood was very much like Groundhog Day. Like every day felt the same. And then when I got my first job at Vice, it was like once I got comfortable there, I couldn't imagine leaving. And it was just like, okay, this is me now. And I didn't know it was going to be 10 years, but like, for some reason, I'm just a creature of habit. Maybe I feel safe within like institutions. And I suppose maybe I've stayed because some of it is fear that I wouldn't fit elsewhere, but also obviously because I love it, and Vice is still, no matter how much the company changes and our culture shifts, like it's still the place where I can make closest to the type of stuff I want to make. It says something about my self-confidence that I haven't dared leave. Like, whenever people say, have you thought about moving on? And I get headhunted often a lot by other companies. I say like, oh, why would I leave Vice? But maybe the real answer is like, oh, because I'm scared. Actually, thinking back, I really, really struggled. And some of my co-workers who were closest to me will testify to that. I remember when I started, I'd written a few music reviews for the magazine, and then I came into the office as a word intern, which basically just means someone who makes cups of tea and like helps out with other stuff. But I ended up doing a bit of writing, and I was pitching some stories. I didn't even know how to pitch a story. I didn't even know what journalism was really. I'd just finished college and I'd done a culture degree. And then my boss said, we need fashion stories, we need to break into the fashion world. And I didn't know anything about fashion, and I didn't have any relationship with the fashion world. But as a person in the world, I had interests, and they were always apparently quite like directional interests. And my worldview was kind of different from like mainstream journalism. And so I was like, well, we could cover all the other fashion weeks that nobody cares about instead of the big four. And my boss was like, that's genius. Like, can you go and do it? And I was like, well, no, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make a film. But I think at the time they gave us so much freedom. They were like, well, yes, you can. Just go with a camera and you can do it. And they were like, you can be on camera. And I remember thinking like, can I? I'm so shy. I don't think I can. But the opportunity was presented to me, and I was so desperate because I'd finished university. I was working like full-time in a bar and at Vice just to pay my rent. And I was so creatively frustrated, and I was like, I want to do something amazing with my life. I know I have something to say, but I didn't know how, and I didn't feel like I had the right training to do it. They gave me this opportunity, put me on a plane, put a camera in my face, and immediately I was like, oof, I don't like this. I didn't feel like I had the right to be doing that job. I knew that I was like what we describe nowadays as like part of the problem, right? I was like another blonde, educated white girl on camera. And I was super woke back then. I didn't want to be part of the problem. And I felt the shy girl, the true shy girl inside me was like, if I look back at my early performance on camera, I'm like, oh my God, I can just see myself being so shy and feeling like I didn't have the right to be there, like my opinion wasn't valid. And the only times it worked was when I was able to be myself, whatever that means. Oh my God, massively. So honestly, I think today, by like TV host standards, I know what to do. I'm up there. I can hold my own, right? I've earned it. But when I started out, I should not have been given that job. I did not know how to be on camera. I could interview people. I was good at engaging, but I was not good at addressing the camera because I had these layers of insecurity that I could not break through. And I know that I was given that opportunity in the beginning because I was in the right place at the right time. Yes, because maybe I am unusual in that Vice recognized that I might look the way I did, but I had a different worldview. And yet I know I wouldn't have been given that opportunity if I had not looked like I fitted in at Fashion Week, basically. That will always haunt me, or not haunt me, but, you know, I realized that I got my start because of a degree of privilege. Even so, as my career progressed and I decided I wanted to get into more serious news, it got to a point where I was like, maybe I need to just stop hosting and I need to get behind the camera and start producing. And so I did. I stepped behind the camera. I produced States of Undress for Viceland, a series for Viceland. And it was great. But instead of making me think, okay, I'm going to be a producer for the rest of my life, it made me go, oh, actually, I'm not as bad of a host as I thought I was. I understand better how to use myself as a tool on camera. And you know what? Like, my voice is valid and I have earned it. But yeah, it definitely was a big problem for me at one point, and I've had to really kind of work through it in order to feel okay about still doing it. Honestly, now I'm like, I want to be a prolific host when I'm in my 40s. I want to do a show when I'm pregnant. I want to do that for society. Basically, that can be my contribution. And also, maybe to show people that not everybody's journey is as it looks. I seem, as we've discussed, someone who has their shit together, but I honestly have had a pretty troubling mental health journey, and I had a difficult childhood, things that I haven't spoken about, but we all have our struggles. That's a good question. What I find challenging about my job has definitely shifted. It used to be performance anxiety and whether or not I had the right to be there. It has now become, as Vice grows and we have a more and more brutal spotlight on us and our journalism comes under greater scrutiny, it is the pressure to make sure that I'm doing the best journalistic job to earn my place there. If I have the privilege to go into the jungle in Colombia for 2 weeks, I want to make sure that I do as good a job as any other journalist who is there. It's basically now turned into anxiety about the journalism rather than my performance, because I've been able to become comfortable around the camera as I've got older. But yeah, it's mainly now like the anxiety over being the best at my job rather than just being there in the first place, and the physical exhaustion of that. Going on shoots is very physically taxing, and after a couple of weeks of no sleep, when you come back home, you need to really take care of yourself because it affects your body and your mental health. I don't think I was an anxious kid. I had an unusual upbringing in that the people who were in charge of me when I was a child, and I'm not going to be too specific because some of these people are still alive, one of my main caregivers had mental health problems and had a personality disorder. So I was raised in a very dysfunctional way where I had to learn from a very young age to survive basically abuse, like physical and psychological abuse. And I was taken care of by this person for 15 years. And I clearly knew that it wasn't right, and yet it was ignored by the rest of my family. And it was so normalized by the family that I thought it was normal. So I need to be clear, I wasn't sexually abused. It was just psychological. It was like, for my entire childhood, I was made to think that I was bad. I couldn't do anything right. And I was good, I was punished. When I was bad, I was punished, and very severely punished, because the person who was in charge of me was very sick. So what that made me as a child was I learned how to perform. I had the inner me, and I had the child that knew how to survive and manipulate this sick person. And I remember being very self-aware from a young age and looking at the people in charge of me and going, I just need to survive this long enough. So I basically became my own role model. I was my own mother and my own father because I didn't have anyone that I felt safe with.